This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.
Okay, welcome everyone to the monthly meeting of the Vegetarian Society. Could you all take a seat so we can get started? Organization founded in 1990 for the purpose of promoting human health, animal rights, and protection of the environment by means of vegetarian education. We're one of the largest vegetarian societies in the country with over 2,000 members. How many here tonight are not members of the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii? Oh, a goodly number. Well, we happen to have, and you may have picked up our green flyer. This is our membership application. And I do recommend that you fill this out, turn it in tonight, or take it home, fill it out, and put it in the mail. When you become a member of the Vegetarian Society, there are many benefits. You will receive our quarterly newsletter, which is very educational and popular, entertaining as well. You will be supporting events like tonight's around our islands. And you actually also will receive discounts with your membership card. And the discounts at Down to Earth, Huckleberry Farms, and a few other vegetarian merchants will more than cover your membership if you shop regularly at those places, which I have a feeling a lot of us here do. Chef Jennifer Flynn. Jennifer is the author of 3 cookbooks. She has worked in the field of culinary arts and nutrition for over a decade. Trained in both traditional European cuisine and vegan raw food cuisine, she's found the perfect balance between the simplicity of plant-based foods and the amazing flavors and techniques found in cultures around the globe. Jennifer's goal is to redefine our culture's definition of fast food by teaching people how quick, easy, and delicious a diet consisting of whole plant foods can be. It's not about sacrificing what you love, it's about redefining it. So if Jennifer is ready. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Give me a little hug since I don't have a leg.
Thank you, Alita. Thank you all for coming this way to listen to me talk a little bit about superfoods. How many of you have heard the term superfoods before? It's pretty popular nowadays. You hear it in the media a lot. I heard about it about 2 years ago, and at first when I heard it, I kind of thought, oh, is this some sort of new diet that's supposed to do magic wonders, help you lose weight? It's the new, Atkins diet or new carb lovers diet, but I still was intrigued. So I decided to look into it a little bit further, and I found a very specific group of foods that did amazing things for the human body. They were in a class all their own. They kind of offered a nutritional punch, if you will, aside from some of the other foods you might find. So I did a little bit of research for about 2 years on these foods, and I compiled a list of 14 specific foods. They're all plant-based. And the reason I chose these 14 foods is because of the nutritional powerhouses that they are. So I'd like to talk a little bit about each one of them. The first one is the apple. Everybody loves apples. There's about 1,000 different varieties grown all over the world. And what's so unique about these are their ability to prevent certain forms of cancer. They're loaded with fiber. They're, I think, the best fast food out there. I think it's faster to stop and bite into your favorite apple rather than going through a drive-thru to get some French fries. So that's why this made my list of superfoods. The next one is the orange factor, is what I like to call it. That's the butternut squashes, the pumpkins, the acorn squashes. And pumpkin is actually kind of stood out in my research as being the overall best of the orange foods, but I didn't want to just single out one, so I chose to include all of them in my book. They are loaded with beta and alpha carotene. They're very high in antioxidants, and what's unique about all of these different superfoods is they all prevent some form of cancer. They all either prevent or fight some form of cancer. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And another one is the avocado, which people usually avoid when they're dieting because they're so high in fat, but they're actually high in the good fats, monounsaturated fat, which is very good for your heart. And there's actually only 5 grams of fat in 1/5 of an avocado. So they're really not, any higher in fat than if you were to, grab some potato chips or tortilla chips or something like that for a snack. It's better to reach for whole foods. The cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, kale, collard greens, those are all very powerful cancer fighters and very high in antioxidants. Oats, everybody knows oats, loves oats. Whole grain. The bean and lentil group, I have lentils here. They're very easy, very high in fiber. They were once touted the poor man's meat because only the poor could afford them as a source of protein, but I think they're probably one of the best foods on the planet. Walnuts, very high in omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Most people think that you have to look to fish to get omegas, and you actually can get them in walnuts and flax seeds. And my personal favorite superfood is chocolate. Chocolate is very high in antioxidants. It's important to look for, the dark varieties that don't contain any milk. The last one here is quinoa. How many of you have heard of quinoa? It's pretty popular now, thank goodness, but it's actually a tiny seed. It's related to spinach and rhubarb. It's in that family. It's not a grain at all. It's gluten-free, and it's very high in protein. And it actually has all of the essential amino acids that your body needs. So this is an excellent source for vegetarian protein. Olive oil also, olives and olive oil, very high in antioxidants and very good for your skin. If you have olive oil and avocado in your diet on a regular basis, you'll probably have some of the healthiest hair and skin out there. But right now, I'd like to get to demonstrating a couple recipes. I think you guys got the recipe handouts. I'm going to be preparing quinoa tabbouleh. Tabbouleh is traditionally a Lebanese salad. It's prepared typically with bulgur wheat. However, a lot of people have a sensitivity to wheat products, so I chose to replace it with quinoa because it is so high in protein and so nutritious. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare the quinoa tabbouleh salad for you. Salad that is loaded with parsley, so you're going to see a lot of green and not a lot of the grain. So we're going to use a lot of parsley here. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be tiny, it's all a matter of your own personal taste. If you don't want to bite into a big chunk of parsley, then chop it really fine. You can use your food processor to make it faster, or you can leave it kind of big. There is mint, fresh mint in this recipe, and I would suggest when you use the mint to chop it very finely because nobody wants to bite into a big piece of mint when they're eating dinner especially. Okay if it's iced tea, but not so great if it's your dinner. And I don't mind it being a little imperfect. I don't mind it being kind of big pieces. I like to see the color of the parsley. I think it's a beautiful color. This dish has a lot of very vibrant colors in it, and I make it quite a bit, especially in the summertime. It's very fresh. In goes the parsley. And then we're going to use a plum tomato or a Roma tomato. The reason I use these is because these tomatoes have a lower water content than other tomatoes. And I don't want it to be really, a mushy salad. I want it to be fluffy and light. So I choose to use these, and I take the seeds out. The recipe calls for 2. I'm preparing just a half of a batch in case you're wondering why I'm just using 1. And I'm taking the seeds out. That's my preference. You can certainly leave them in. It's not going to hurt anything. And we're just going to give them a quick chop. And the other things that go in this salad are basically a simple dressing of lemon juice and olive oil. So we've actually got a couple of superfoods in this dish. We've got the quinoa, which is actually taking center stage here, and we've got olive oil and tomato. This recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Typically, in a pretty good sized lemon like this, you'll get about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half in each half of the lemon. So,
is it working? Yes. Okay.
okay, I've got my lovely assistant back holding my microphone. So I'm going to eyeball this. Half of a large lemon will give me about the amount of lemon juice I need. For a full recipe, just use 1 large lemon. And if you, when you're shopping for lemons, I've noticed that if the skin feels pretty thin, they're usually pretty juicy. If it's hard and the skin feels thick, they're usually not that juicy. And if you end up with some like that, you might need to use, 1.5, or give it a roll on the counter. And by that I mean to just, take your lemon and just hold it with the palm of your hand, give it some pressure, and just do that. Roll it with your palm. That'll release the juices and get them out a little bit easier for you. And then this recipe also calls for sea salt. I'm not adding it right now because I actually like it without the salt, but the recipe, if you do like salt, start with a little bit and add it. If you try and cut down on salt, or it's something you want to do, if you want to cut down on sodium, adding citrus to dishes bumps up the flavor and usually requires that you use less salt. So if you have a recipe that's got any citrus in it, or a recipe that citrus would taste good in, lemons or limes, you can add a little bit more of that and less salt, and the flavor should be about the same. And the last thing here I'm going to add, second to last thing, is a scallion or green onion. We're just going to give that a quick chop. And what I found yesterday when I was shopping for these ingredients was the store didn't have a lot of green onions left. So I improvised, and I used a little bit of finely minced red onion, and it came out really great. So if the store doesn't have exactly what you have on the recipe, you can certainly improvise. Red onions are very mild. And if you don't like onions, you can leave them out. And aside from a little bit of pepper, this salad is basically finished. And what I like to do with leftovers is you can stuff them into a toasted pita, whole wheat pita. There's also these great tortillas on the market. They're sprouted grain tortillas, and they're also a complete protein source. I eat them just about every day. And you can make a quick sandwich with the hummus, which I'm going to show you next. Use the hummus as kind of a condiment in the tortilla or the pita. Add the tabbouleh and some lettuce and roll it up. And it's a quick lunch or dinner, especially on the go. So a lot of the recipes I created tips of how to use the leftovers to make something new the next day, so that when you're making dinner, you're also making your lunch for the next day. And that's the tabbouleh salad, and that's what it's going to look like. It looks just like summer. I love this salad. You'll get to try it at the end. Okay, the next dish that I'd like to prepare for you is white bean hummus. And I'm sure most of you have probably heard of hummus or tried hummus, and it's typically made with garbanzo beans or chickpeas, and they're pretty meaty in texture and kind of grainy. I changed the recipe a little bit and chose to use cannellini or white beans. They're a lot creamier, and I just like the texture. And the few people that I made it for that tried it, they preferred it over the garbanzo bean variety. If you have garbanzo beans at home, certainly use those in their place, just the same amount. You can really use any bean, any white bean that you have. Before I get started, tahini, is that something that that everyone's familiar with. It's a sesame seed butter. I prefer to use raw tahini. It's not easy to find. Usually you have to go to a health food store to find it. And I try and buy the no salt variety because I like to control the salt in my food. If you have toasted or traditional tahini, you can certainly use it in this recipe. It's just going to change the flavor a little bit because it has more of a nutty flavor when they toast it. I like to use raw nut and seed butters simply because I like to retain the nutritive value of that food. I believe by cooking it, you're changing the makeup of the fats in the food and the vitamins and nutrients. A lot of them are altered or destroyed during the roasting process. So I believe if you can eat it raw, you should eat it raw. And if it's something like rice or quinoa that you have to cook to eat, then certainly cook that. And that's pretty much my basic philosophy on everything that I eat. So this is raw tahini, and I got this at Down to Earth. I believe it's the only place on the island that sells it. And the brand is Maranatha for anyone that's interested in trying it. The hummus dish comes together very fast. If you have a food processor, you just basically put everything in the food processor, let it go until it's smooth, and you've got hummus. And this dish is not only a great appetizer with vegetables, raw vegetables or steamed vegetables, it's a great condiment for sandwiches. I use it a lot in sandwiches with sprouts and cucumbers and tomatoes when I'm in a hurry, and it's really a filling and pretty good sandwich when you have leftovers. Nothing goes to waste. And these are the cannellini beans. I prefer to cook my own, but when I'm in a hurry, organic canned beans are just fine. I just check the label to make sure there's no added sugar. Usually organic canned beans will have water and salt, and I've seen some commercial varieties that have added corn syrup and some other things I can't pronounce, so I stick with the organic. And that's 2 cups of organic white beans. On the weekends I cook a bunch, but during the week I don't have time. And I have everything pre-measured out, but we've got 5 tablespoons of olive oil. You can, if you want to reduce the fat in this recipe, you can reduce it to 3 to 4 tablespoons. The point is you don't want to eat the whole entire recipe when you make it. But I've made it with 1 tablespoon of olive oil. It tastes different. It doesn't taste as creamy and rich, but it still tastes pretty good. And this is lemon juice, fresh lemon juice. And garlic. Some people don't have a taste for raw garlic, and they just, maybe if they're taking it to work, they don't want to do that to their coworkers. They don't want to be eating raw garlic all day. So you can use a little bit of garlic powder for the garlic flavor, or you can leave it out and add some different spices that you might like. But I like garlic. I'm sure the people around me don't, but I like it, so in it goes. And then I add the salt at the end. I usually like to try it before. Again, sometimes I'll leave the salt out and I'll just add more lemon juice, and that bumps the flavor up quite a bit. So this comes together pretty fast. I'm going to let you see how quickly it does. And that's it. And this is it's still a little chunky. I like leaving it like that sometimes. Leave it for maybe another 20 seconds and it's the consistency of smooth peanut butter. And a lot of times when this is served in restaurants, they'll garnish it with a Greek olive and a little extra olive oil on top. Does anybody have any questions or comments? No, I don't think it'd ruin the taste. Her question was to replace coconut oil for the olive oil. You can. There's certain brands of coconut oil that have more of a coconut flavor than others. Just check the label because some of them are chemically processed to remove the coconut flavor, and you don't want that. You don't want the natural flavor taken out by chemicals. But some are definitely much more mild than others. I think... I can't think of the brand. I think it's Nutriva, has a pretty mild flavor, and I use it in some recipes that I don't want the flavor of coconut, and it tastes fine. But I'd be interested to see how that turns out. I might try it myself. You know what? I may have forgotten to, but it does have olive oil in it.
You put it in, but
I did put it in.
You had it separate.
I had it pre-measured in a little container. But yeah, olive oil definitely. Does anybody else have any questions? They were cooked. Soak them overnight or for 8 hours, and then bring them to a boil, reduce them, and let them simmer for about 2. But like I said, I probably 75% of the time will use canned organic beans, because unless it's during the weekend, I don't have time to soak overnight and deal with that. But I really like to, because it's much more natural than opening a can. I try and buy all my food that it doesn't have a label. You know, it's all fresh. I like to make it all myself. But there's nothing wrong with cans. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. It's much better than going to McDonald's. Yeah. Once I get the food processor back, I'm going to be preparing one other dish. It's a dessert. It's I call them chai bonbons, and the reason I call them chai is I use a lot of the traditional spices that you find in chai tea. And this is based on when I was a raw foodist. I ate a lot of raw almonds and walnuts and dates, and I made a lot of candies and different dishes with those basic ingredients. So this recipe was inspired by my time as a raw foodist, and I think everybody wants something sweet, and I think everybody loves dessert, and I think that it tells your mind that dinner's over and your meal's over, and it lets you move on and not eat all night. So I think dessert every day, every meal is essential, honestly. And so I put together I thought that'd be pretty popular. And I thought chocolate being a superfood would be pretty popular too. That was my favorite part. And when I was writing the book, I went a little crazy with the chocolate. But I put in recipes for desserts that kept the foods whole, and I think they're just as good for you as the entree that you had before the dessert. So does anyone have any questions about any of the foods while I'm waiting for my food processor? No, I didn't. Her question was if chocolate was in the recipe, and no, it's not. But the recipe for the chai bonbons, I have added chocolate to it before. And when I'm using cocoa powder, I use organic, fair trade cocoa powder. You can find that at many stores now. I think actually they have it at Walmart, so it's pretty easy to find. Unsweetened. You don't want the sweetened variety or the hot chocolate variety. Just pure unsweetened cocoa powder, and I use that in a lot of the recipes. The question was why I'm not doing a raw food diet. I was doing the raw food diet for probably about a year and a half to 2 years, and I still love it. I still do, once in a while I'll go a week or two eating all raw foods, but after about a year I ended up having some health problems, and my doctor told me that I was too thin, and there were some things with my body that were happening that I needed to change. So I went back to eating whole grains, and I still eat 80% raw food. I mean, I basically get all my groceries out of the produce section, but I do eat whole grain, brown rice, quinoa. I eat a lot of quinoa. I love quinoa, and I eat sprouted grain bread. So now I really love that I learned about raw foods and that I did experience that. I learned a lot about food. I learned a lot about how food interacts with your body and how you feel when you eat certain things. If I eat whole grain, even pasta, the next day I feel like I have a hangover because I'm not used to it, and because of the wheat, and because it's so heavy, and I just want to take a nap. The answer to that question is I had some health problems that I shouldn't have been having for my age. And so I had to stop. And I think that there's nothing wrong with eating whole grains. I think they're on this planet for a reason, and I feel great the way I eat now. So I went to the Living Like Culinary Arts Institute. I read about it myself for probably 6 months before that, and I heard about the school through a friend and went up there for about 2 months. It was a great experience. That's a great question. I used to use carrot powder all the time, and the reason I don't use it now is because I can't find it. And I know it's available on the internet, but I'm not a very good internet shopper. I want it now. I don't want to wait 2 to 6 weeks for delivery. So the closest store that has it to me now is like 40 miles away, and I just don't go. But I don't eat it every day, and I think that just like any other food, moderation is key. But when I read all of the health benefits that chocolate had to offer, and that it has more antioxidants in it than, green tea, I was on board with that. I said, that's going in my book, and I'm putting as many recipes in there that I can about chocolate. And for a while, probably 2 months, every morning I would have a big cup of piping hot green tea and this. That's how I started my day for like 2 months, and I felt great. I loved it, and I gained a little bit of weight because of it, so I had to cut it out, and I don't do it every day, but hot tea with dark chocolate. And the thing about chocolate is you want to avoid milk chocolate at all costs. The addition of milk to chocolate, basically, it deletes all of the nutritional value that the chocolate has to offer. It prevents your body from absorbing the nutritional value that the chocolate has to offer. The higher the percentage of cocoa, the better. A lot of people don't really care for the bitterness of dark chocolate, so I would say start at 70%, and if you can go higher, go higher. Green and Blacks is a great brand of organic fair trade chocolate, and they're probably my favorite that's out there. But there's so many out there now, and they're available at so many, different stores. They have them at Target, so you can find good, healthy chocolate. And for chocolate lovers, I love that this is like a health food. In moderation.
Do you ever use a blender?
I do. I use a Vitamix. I use it. I make smoothies pretty much every morning for breakfast, and the Vitamix is great. If you don't have one, and you're looking for a powerful blender that'll blend just about anything, I think you can blend, nails down to sand with that thing. It's so powerful. But I would suggest getting one. They're pretty expensive though. They're like $300, but it'll last forever and it's worth it. So now that I have my food processor back, I'm going to make the last after this question. I have, actually, this was loaned to me, but I have this one at home. It's a Cuisinart. What I would suggest, and the way I bought mine, Cuisinarts are usually pretty pricey, and I waited for, I think, Memorial Day to come because I knew there'd be sales, and I went to Macy's and got it for like 75% off. So wait for the next holiday. Or Costco. Okay, I'm going to make the chai bonbons now, and this one comes together pretty quickly. Walnuts are the superfood of choice in this recipe, and they're loaded, like I said, with omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And the spices, I used to drink chai lattes when I was a coffee drinker all the time, and I really miss the flavor of chai. Sometimes I'll even throw a little black pepper in this recipe, and it sounds kind of weird to put black pepper in dessert, but it really enhances the spiciness of the cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. And a little pinch of salt also enhances the flavor of this candy. But I didn't put salt in the recipe because I try to keep salt out as much as possible and let people decide for themselves if it needs salt, because everybody's different. So I'm going to go ahead and load everything in the food processor. Before I put the mic down, I just want to tell you, raw almonds are much harder and denser than walnuts. So I break these down first, and the people in the front are going to hear it. The people in the back probably won't, but it's going to sound like nails probably in the food processor. But I'm going to grind these down to a coarse meal, and then I'll add everything else, and it'll come together pretty quickly. So we've got half a cup of raw almonds, and I emphasize using raw nuts and seeds always. They're available everywhere. They're available at Costco, and that's usually where I buy mine. But I think if you're looking for nutrition, it's better to use the best. And the best doesn't necessarily mean more money.
It just means maybe making another trip to another store.
The next thing I'm going to add to the blender are 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 3/4 of a cup of raw walnuts, a cup of dates, and I already went through these at home, but I buy pitted dates, especially if they're sold by the pound, because I don't want to pay for something that I'm going to throw away. So when you buy pitted dates, always run your knife through them, because you'll inevitably run across a seed, and a seed in your food processor is not a good thing. And just kind of scatter them around. You don't want them to be all clumped together. Whoops, lost one. And I put in the recipe to use medjool dates. Those are my favorite dates because they're really tender and they're really sweet, and they remind me of caramel. But you don't have to use them. If you can't find them or they're just a little too pricey at the moment, go ahead and use a different variety of date. Just make sure you pack them in the cup. And then the cloves and the ginger, ground cloves and ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon each. And then I'm just going to let this go for a minute, and the candy will come together. And basically you just can form it into balls, which is what I do. Or you can press it into a parchment paper-lined square baking dish and put it in the freezer, and then pop it out and cut it into little squares, which is actually a little bit easier and a little bit faster. I don't know if you can see that very well in the back, but that's the mixture you're going to end up with. And if you don't want to make candy out of it, another great use for this recipe is to cut up apples and bananas in the morning and sprinkle this on top as like a crumble topping, and it's a great breakfast. I do that a lot with this too. And you can certainly play around with the spices. You know, you can just add cinnamon and maybe fold a few raisins in, and it kind of makes like an oatmeal cookie taste. And then you basically just roll them into these little candies. You can make them as small or as big as you like. Another great way to serve these is to roll them in a little bit of shredded coconut, unsulfured, organic shredded coconut. It makes them, pretty, and coconut's pretty good for you too. So it's another good addition to this recipe. But they're easy to come together, and if you have kids, this is a great way to get them in the kitchen, is to help you rolling these things out. You can use a measuring tablespoon, a small ice cream scoop, or a melon baller to form them, and you just roll them in your hand. And like I said, it's a great thing for kids to do, to get them in the kitchen. They're not around anything hot, they're not around anything sharp, and it kind of inspires them to get in there and be creative. Does anybody have any other questions? I think I read something about that too about a year ago. I don't really remember what the article said. I know black walnuts, to me, are a little drier and a little more bitter. So I choose not to use them. And if you have them, you can probably do half and half in the recipe. But I personally don't really care for the flavor. I think they're too bitter. That's a great question. She asked how long the recipe would keep. I put it in the freezer. I leave them in the freezer for probably 2 months. They're actually really good frozen. If you use it as a crumble topping or as a candy, once I form all the candies, I put them in the freezer. And they kind of get like a caramel texture, like a hard caramel. I do sometimes. The question was soaking the almonds before I prepare it. Actually, the question was soaking the nuts. You don't really need to soak walnuts. When I was doing raw foods and I was eating a lot of nuts, I soaked all of my almonds because it does make them more digestible. I don't know how many of you have heard that or seen any classes where people do that. If you soak almonds, you want to do it for about 8 hours, and you can certainly do that with this recipe. But because I'm breaking them down so much in the food processor, I don't find it necessary for digestibility to soak them first. If you do soak them and you don't dehydrate them after that, the recipe is a little bit more perishable, so you want to keep it in the refrigerator, of course, or the freezer for a shorter period of time. I would say maybe 2 to 3 weeks in the freezer and about a week at the most in the refrigerator. Dried figs. Dried figs are good to add. Because of the seeds, I don't use them a lot of the times in these recipes because they have so many little seeds, but I have made this candy before with it, and I actually made this candy with dried unsulfured apricots as well. So any kind of dried, kind of high sugar, sticky fruit, and you can throw in a couple dried cherries or raisins. I did it once with all raisins, and it didn't taste very good, so I wouldn't recommend trying that unless you have a lot of raisins and you don't have anything to do with them. Does anybody else have any questions?
How do you decide when to use the Cuisinart and when to use the Vitamix?
The question was, how do I decide when to use the Cuisinart and when to use the Vitamix, so food processor over blender? The blender I use for liquids. If I were to make the candy in the blender, even though it is a powerful blender, the dates and the nuts at the bottom are going to get processed a lot quicker than what's on top, so you're going to end up with a really dense, thick mass at the bottom around the blades, and then the top won't get processed as much. I tried making something with nuts in it in my blender, and it didn't work out very well, and it was the Vitamix. So anything that is sticky like that, you want to use in a bowl, in a food processor that's got more room to evenly spin around, because the blender is more cylindrical. It's better for soups, smoothies, puddings, mousses, things like that, where you want to incorporate a lot of air. Probably, if you do, I would eat it within a day. Almond milk, I was always taught that it's supposed to last 5 days, but every time I've made it after the third day, it doesn't. It smells funny. It smells off. It's kind of a daunting process because you have to, squeeze the pulp. I don't know how many of you have made almond milk yourself, but you basically combine about a cup of raw almonds in a blender with 3 to 4 cups of water and let it go until the almonds are broken down into a pulp, and then they have these mesh bags that you pour the milk through to strain it, and you squeeze it out so you're left with the pulp. So it's kind of a messy process. It doesn't take that long, and it's really pretty simple, but it can be a little messy. So I make a lot, and I freeze half of it, and I have those glass mason jars, and I'll break them up into the 2-cup jars and freeze like maybe 2 or 3 of the jars and leave one in the refrigerator. And then if I know I'm going to need more, I just take one out and it's thawed the next day. For my protein needs? I'm completely vegan. I don't eat any animal-based products whatsoever. And I work out every day. I run, I do Pilates, I hike, and I eat, this is what I eat. I eat quinoa, I eat lentils. I don't eat beans probably more than 2 times a week. A lot of times when I do, I eat hummus. I eat quinoa all the time. But most plant-based foods contain protein, and it's a matter of combining the right fruits and vegetables. If you eat a wide variety of plant-based foods, most people, generally speaking, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just going by what works for me, and I'm in pretty good health. I never get sick, and I do work out. So I've never run into a problem with a protein deficiency. And actually, people ask about protein all the time, especially when you're vegan or vegetarian. They're always, the first question on everybody's mind is, where do you get your protein? Because everyone believes that the only protein source available to the human race is through meat, and that's not the case. There's a lot of plant-based proteins, and like I said, most plant-based foods do contain some amount of protein. Even fruits, apples have protein in them. It's just a very small amount. But if you eat a rainbow of foods, you're going to meet your needs. But check with your doctor. The question was, he got tired of people asking him where he got his protein needs from, and he said that the same place horses do. I wasn't doing it every day. I would do about 1 to 2 ounces about 4 times a week. And I was eating a lot of, I ate a lot of flax crackers and buckwheat granola. I couldn't get enough of buckwheat granola. But I ate a really wide variety, and I taught raw food classes, and I was a private chef for people as well. So I really ate a huge variety of food, and I played around with it, and it was really kind of a difficult choice because I loved the diet so much, but I just was having some problems, and they went away. When I started eating quinoa and brown rice and beans a couple times a week, the problems went away. So I go back and forth, and the reason I chose to write about specific foods rather than a specific diet is because I got tired of, I guess, the label. Oh, she's a vegetarian, or oh, she's a vegan, she won't eat that. I just wanted to get back to basics and just say, I eat whole foods and not really label it. You don't have to be on a specific diet to be healthy or to enjoy certain foods. What works for one person might not work for somebody else, and I didn't want to just be out there advocating one way of eating. I wanted to incorporate everything I had learned through my career, different cooking techniques and different different ways of eating. I studied the Mediterranean diet for a while, vegetarian and vegan, of course, raw food diet, and I think they all have a great thing to offer. And I think that just like there's so many different diets, there's so many different dietary needs. So I wanted to put together recipes and foods that were simple, basic, based on whole foods. She asked if I could give you the recipe for buckwheat granola. For those of you that have a food dehydrator, that's how I prepared it. Was that okay? It's a raw food recipe, and you would start with 5 cups. This is a pretty big recipe. You're going to end up with, I think, 6 sheets of the granola. It's about 5 cups of raw buckwheat groats, and those you can find at the health food store. Soak them I probably soaked them for 6 hours, and when you soak them, they bulk up a lot. They pretty much double in size. So when you're soaking them in jars, you want to maybe fill it halfway and then fill the rest with water before you soak it. When you rinse them, they're really slimy. They have a really thick water. The water gets really thick and gelatinous. Rinse them really well. Get rid of all of that until the water runs clear. Then you're going to use about 6 cups of pitted dates. Process those with some water, maybe I think a 1/4 cup of water to get kind of a smooth paste. Stir that into your buckwheat groats. And then you can add equal portions of sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, raisins, probably about a 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup each. I just do a good handful. And then dehydrate them 8 hours, flip them over, and do them about 8 to 12 more. The question was, where is quinoa grown? It's grown primarily in South America, and I've never tried to grow it at home. I know it's a seed, so maybe I'll put it in some dirt and water it and see what happens. But I don't know. I know that it's a seed, and it's in the same family as rhubarb and spinach. So I'm not really sure actually how they cultivate it or how they get the final product. But I know that I've never tried to grow it. Oh, for the granola? The dehydrating part of it, dehydrate it for about 8 hours. You want to spread it out on the Teflex sheets, flip it over, peel the sheets, and dehydrate it probably another 12, depending on how humid it is that day. When I make that recipe in Hawaii, it takes longer than when I make it in California because of the humidity here. And one other thing I want to mention too is a lot of the recipes that I have are interchangeable. You can, if you're a raw foodist, you can make them raw. The quinoa tabbouleh, replace it with cauliflower. Take raw cauliflower, remove the stems, put the florets into a food processor, keep pulse chopping it until it's the size of quinoa or the size of probably a 1/2 grain of rice, and use that instead of the quinoa, and just follow the recipe. most recipes you can definitely interchange them to suit your diet. If you're a vegetarian and you do eat dairy, you can certainly throw, feta cheese into something, or, just use your imagination and do what works for you with these recipes. They're all vegan recipes, so there are no animal byproducts whatsoever in any of them, but definitely, add what you like. I don't know. I really don't know, and that's why I kind of struggled with it. But then I kind of thought, well, this food is here for a reason, and it especially with quinoa and rice, it's been feeding civilizations for centuries, thousands of years, and something in it my body wanted. And I know I would crave things sometimes, and this was after about a year and a half, so it's not like I was having these old withdrawal symptoms from wheat products and cooked products. I had been raw for a while. I really don't know what was in it. I think that I just maybe was out of balance. It was just something that worked for my body for a while, and then it didn't work anymore. The question was, can you have raw grains? You can if you soak and sprout them. They become living foods. And you can make, actually, the quinoa tabbouleh. You can sprout the quinoa. You can soak it overnight. This is kind of, you have to really love being in the kitchen to do some of the sprouting. I really didn't enjoy sprouting so much. I did it sometimes. Some people love it, some people don't. But if you do want to sprout quinoa, just soak it overnight and then drain it out. And you just basically, I use big glass mason jars, probably 1.5 gallon size. Put about a cup of quinoa in there and soak it, and then tilt it on its side after you drain it, and just keep turning it, and eventually you'll see it sprout. And it takes about 5 days. And these little, you'll see the little sprouts coming out. No, just rinse it. And the reason you rinse it is quinoa is covered with sort of a bitter coating, and I believe it's to ward off insects and things like that. It's kind of like the plant's natural defense. So if you don't rinse it off, the quinoa might be a little bitter after you cook it. I tried it once, and I did notice a difference in taste. I wanted to see what would happen. And when you do rinse it, though, you make sure you have a very fine mesh sieve. The very, very fine. You might think the one you have is fine, but those little things fall through. So use a very fine mesh sieve and let it really drain well. The question was about the oil, the olive oil being one of the superfoods, and I used grapeseed oil in one of the recipes. I use grapeseed oil when I'm going to heat the oil, and that's because olive oil is a very delicate fruit oil, and when you heat it above a certain temperature, it destroys everything good about it. So you may as well just choose a different kind of oil. A great way to mimic sautéed vegetables is to steam the vegetables, lightly steam them. Pat off the additional water and then drizzle it with olive oil. And that's going to give you a sautéed taste and a sautéed texture without damaging the oil. Canola oil, it is a healthy oil. It's got omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in it. Canola and olive are probably your best. For stir frying, I would use grapeseed oil, because grapeseed can withstand higher temperatures, I believe up to 475. So if I'm making, once in a while I'll make oatmeal cookies with, whole wheat flour and whole oats, and I'll use grapeseed oil because it doesn't have any flavor. I've used olive oil too, actually, in cookies, and they tasted fine, but I wasn't very happy about it because I knew what I was doing to the oil, but it was in a pinch, so. But grapeseed oil, it's great. It's great stuff. Loaded with antioxidants. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, anyway, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you coming and sharing this evening with me. And I'm going to pass you off to Carl, and I hope you enjoy the food.
You've just heard Jennifer Flynn talk about her work and her cooking, but we've had two people in front of you tonight. The other one is Leslie Ashburn, who's a local force. She does cooking lessons. She is a caterer, and she does dinners. And so let's let her make an announcement about what she's up to. Leslie?
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Jennifer, too. That was really great. Yes, I just wanted to say hello to everyone. There's a few people here actually tonight that are attending a community dinner that I'm a cook for. If those people could just raise their hands quickly, take a look. If you have a chance, just go say hi to these people and ask them about the dinner, the kind of food that's served there. It's always 100% vegan. The menu is different every single time. The next dinner is on the 16th, which is next Wednesday. And then the following Friday after that, we have another dinner with a different menu. So please take advantage of all the resources that are here available for you. I'd love to see you. So thanks again for coming, and thanks to Jennifer.
Well, I think we're finished. If any of you have enough energy to pick up your chairs and hang them up on those things, that would be a good idea. You're standing on a dance floor, and so when you come back here to taste the samples that Jennifer and her mother has prepared, please take them outside to eat rather than onto the dance floor.
This program is brought to you by the Vegetarian Society of Hawaii, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing with the community the many benefits of a vegetarian diet. Free monthly meetings include vegetarian experts found locally and on the mainland, quick and easy cooking demonstrations, and healthful and delicious food samples. Members enjoy an informative quarterly newsletter, social activities, and discounts at many vegetarian-friendly restaurants and health food stores. For an application, call 944-8344. That's 944-8344. Or visit our website at www.vsh.org. vsh.org.